Hello, everybody. This is your professor, Ian Jones. I just wanted to record a video discussing what we're doing for essay number 4. Here are the instructions for that. And I'm calling essay number 4, You're the Prof, research essay. So this is a research paper. As Zoidberg notes here, rhetoric comes in all shapes and sizes. So that's what we're going to work on in this paper. You're going to choose a different kind of rhetoric than we've been looking at this semester. This semester we've been focusing on post or apocalyptic rhetoric for the most part. We kind of deviated a little bit, but that was our focus. And you're going to choose a different kind of rhetoric to focus on for your paper. So let's take a look at uh, the breakdown of the timetable. As you can see, they're the same things we've been doing with every paper: proposal, peer editing, letter to the reader, and then your final draft. That should say 6+ pages. This is a bit longer, but you'll need that space, and you'll be able to fill it very quickly, so don't worry about that. There's a couple extra things for this paper, what I'm calling a study guide and a study guide presentation, which is your final exam, right? And I'll have videos on both of those, right? Separate videos on each one of those, so don't worry about that too much right now. Instead, let's focus on this paper, okay? So the topic, in this course, this is advanced composition and critical thinking. We started by focusing on classical rhetorical terminology and techniques, right? The classical appeals. We moved on. We talked about fallacies and different things. So the classical or classic ways of discussing and thinking about rhetoric. And then we moved on. We talked about a bunch of texts that use a specific kind of rhetoric, and that's apocalyptic rhetoric, right? So we looked at Trump's speech, we looked at Thunberg's speech, we looked at a bunch of other articles, shorter pieces about that used apocalyptic rhetoric. And for your second paper, of course, you compared to articles that you found that are using apocalyptic rhetoric. So we were using that as a kind of case study, apocalyptic rhetoric, as just one kind of rhetoric to think about, how different people use that genre of rhetoric in different ways. It's just a way for us to practice thinking about how rhetoric works by narrowing our focus. And then for our third module, third unit of the course, we use The Road as a case study, as a longer text, right? In the second part, we were reading essays and shorter pieces. And then we moved to The Road, which is a longer work. And of course, we deviated this semester because of events. I gave people the option to work on post-humanism, which is related but very different, obviously, than apocalyptic rhetoric. It's dealing with similar, I would say, some of the same themes, but very different. Anyways, either way you look at it, we were looking at these as case studies, as a specific kind of rhetoric, right? And going into more depth using those texts. So anyways, for your last paper, what you're going to do is you're going to pretend that you're the prof of English 1B. That's right, you've been hired by Chafee, you're going to teach this course, and you need to find your own theme for the semester, right? I chose apocalyptic rhetoric, and of course, as I've been saying, post-humanism is a kind of side option, but originally I designed this with apocalyptic rhetoric in mind. That was my theme, right? That's a way to focus our readings throughout the course. So what you're going to do is you're going to choose a specific kind of rhetoric that interests you, and that can be broad, something like patriotic rhetoric, sports-related rhetoric, right? There's a way we talk about sports and being excellent and all that kind of stuff. Anti-vaxxers, right? They have their own kind of rhetoric, this kind of conspiratorial thinking that the government and big pharmacies out to get us, that kind of stuff. And there's tons of other things you can do. You can look at the rhetoric of veganism, right? There's a certain kind of rhetoric that vegans use. You can look at I don't know, gun culture. You can look at tons of stuff. Anyways, the sky's the limit, really. It's up to you to find something that interests you and something you know about specifically and you want to investigate and learn more about, right? So you're going to choose a kind of rhetoric and you're going to choose a central text for your course, for your hypothetical course. So I chose to focus on apocalyptic rhetoric and I chose The Road as our central text, right? So your text could be anything. It could be a book, could be a song, could be a music video, like we're working on week 14. Could be a music album, right? A complete album. You can find some if you're interested in like a whole album that fits together, right? Like I can't think of any good examples. Uh, who does The Suburbs? I can't remember. Arcade Fire, right? Arcade Fire's album The Suburbs, which is all about the kind of ennui of modern suburban middle class life, right? So you could talk about that. Anyways, as an album, TV series, a movie, any kind of popular culture item you think is relevant. Could be art, right? Maybe you're really into the graffiti art of a certain graffiti artist, or a play you really like, an actor that whose work is really important, or something, a director, something like that. You could really stretch this if you want. You're not restricted by time, language, or genre. Although, of course, it'd be helpful if we can access your and get into your choice. Don't choose something too esoteric, right? Because you want to make a case for the social and political relevance of this text, right? This has to be something that would be impactful for other Chafee students. Because remember, you're pretending you're the professor, so you would be teaching your colleagues. So it has to be something that would have an impact for most students. So don't choose like some, ancient Sumerian text or something like that, because that's probably not as relevant and immediate for most people. So this means also there has to be a conversation occurring around this central text that you choose, right? It has to have stirred up some kind of controversy. It can't be some self-published book on Amazon that nobody's read, right? You have to choose something that is well known and really engages with public ideas, right? Because you have to come up with background information on the piece for your paper, and you need to um, you know provide background on the conversation going on around your chosen central text. Okay, so you're going to choose at least two works that provide additional information, background, theory, that kind of stuff about your text. Um, so basically, in your paper, you're going to tell us, so what? That's what you're arguing. Like, why should we study this? What is important about this rhetoric and this text that you're putting forth for this course, right? You're justifying why the work you chose is relevant, explaining why we, as students of rhetoric, should engage with the piece in a particular way, right? So again, that's what your thesis is all about, why this is an important thing to study. So let's look at the structure. As I said, it should be 6 or more pages into roughly 4 sections. So of course your introduction, where you present your text and the kind of rhetoric you're going to explore. This is like your introductory paragraph. You only have 6 pages around there, so you need to be specific, right? Many texts can be interpreted in different ways, so you really need to focus in on how you want to interpret that text, and that kind of rhetoric you're looking at. As I mentioned up here, you can work on patriotic rhetoric, but that's huge, right? So you need to kind of narrow that down a little bit. You can't cover everything about that in 6 pages. I know 6 pages sounds like a lot at this point in your writing career, but it's really not once you start getting into this. So you need to be specific about how you're covering and what you're covering, narrow your field enough that you're not trying to cover everything and end up saying nothing, right? That's kind of what happens sometimes. And remember, end with a thesis statement. Remember, your thesis statement should be a debatable point in argument and act as a roadmap, right? So if your thesis is, the road is a book about the end of the world, well, that's not really an argument, right? That's just an observation. So you need to make an argument, right? The road is a book about the apocalypse, and it should be studied by Chafee students, or studied by students of rhetoric because, and then give me some reasons. And it should act as a roadmap for the rest of your paper, right? The reasons you provide in your thesis are what you're going to explore later in your paper. That's how thesis statements ideally work. So the second section, some background on your chosen rhetorical, um, uh, you know, rhetoric that you're looking at, and the central textures you've chosen, right? Don't spend too long in this section. Summarizing everything about patriotic rhetoric would take you forever. So, this is why I'm saying you need to focus. It should just be a few paragraphs long, right? As I say here, keep it to 2 paragraphs maximum. You're just this is just a brief summary. You're setting up ideas and context. So when you get into your analysis in the next couple sections, there's some context for your readers, right? So you don't want to spend too long here. You just want to give your readers an overview of the topic, right? Because you're going to get into specifics here. Okay, so your next section, section 3, this is where you're going to survey what people have been saying about this, your chosen rhetorical focus and the central text that you chose. So what is the reaction to this text been in reviews and articles? As I note here again, you can't cover every opinion on the internet, so you just want to find like 2, maybe 3 representative opinions or voices talking about your rhetorical focus in the central text, right? You shouldn't. I mean, you can't cover everybody, so you need to find like someone who is for it, someone who's against it. Like a couple representative points of view, right? Should be about a page, maybe a bit longer because you have to talk about both your rhetorical focus and the central text, right? So don't spend too long here, but you do want to survey what the conversation is going on about this, what the conversation people have is about. What, man, I'm tripping on my tongue. What conversations people are having about this rhetorical focus and this central text, like what's going on already in the world regarding these 2 things. Okay, this is building on your second section, more or less, right? You're giving more context, because then you're going to get into some more analytical stuff here, right? This is where you're going to bring in uh, um, uh, sources that you can use to discuss your text that aren't necessarily focused on your text, right? So, as I know here, imagine you are a prof and need to put together your next syllabus, and you want a new text and theme to replace the road. Why should your text be chosen as this replacement? For this section, you need to use at least 2 sources that are not reviews or reactions to your text. You need to find texts about the theme you find so compelling, but that are not in direct conversation with your artifact. So think about the way that I chose texts in Unit 2 of this course that were about apocalyptic rhetoric, but were not about the road. And you need to do something similar and then analyze how you can use these texts to then discuss your central text, right? So you might think about articles like the Man-Pocalypse, man, that I chose as like an academic text for us to look at, or that Don't Starve text, which we didn't actually get to read, but it's about apocalypse, the post-apocalypse genre of fiction. It's not directly talking about the road, but you can bring in those ideas to talk about the road, or the Trump speech and the Thunberg speech, the way that we discuss the morality of using this kind of rhetoric. We can bring that into discussion with the road, right? So you need to do something similar in this part of your paper. And this is why it's a research paper, so this is what we're concentrating on, right? Using these sources that you find that are engaged with this kind of rhetoric that you've chosen and that you can use to help us analyze that central text. Okay, so this is kind of the heart of the paper. This is what you need to be thinking about as you move forward, and then wrap it up with your conclusion, right? Last paragraph or so to reiterate your thesis and main supporting points. Conclude by arguing why your artifact is a timely piece to study. So that Kairos idea, right? Really make an appeal to Kairos here at the end. In other words, why should we be interested in your pop culture artifact in 2020, especially? Right? So end with that appeal to Kairos. We should study this now because whatever. Right? Okay, so research requirements. You need to use at least 5 research sources. You probably want to use more, but you need to use at least 5, and I want you to use at least 3 different types of sources. At least one from a Chafee library database, at least one from an ebook or anthology or textbook, and at least one from a credible website. So that's 3 categories, but you need to use 5 sources. So you could use, 3 from a library database, then 1 and 1, or 3 websites, then 1 and 1. Remember the word credible is here. Make sure that you're not just using any old site, right? As I noticed here, you cannot use some of these kind of like junkier sites, right? I mean, Wikipedia is okay, but Wikipedia is not suitable for academic writing, right? And I can tell you stories about that. Maybe I will sometime. But things like dictionary.com and gradesaver.com, these are not in-depth sources. You can use these, but they don't count as one of your 5 sources, right? These are just for basic information. You need to use ideas from other sources. So make sure you adhere to that. And then here's some ideas about just some tips, right? And let me reiterate it again. Don't waste too much time on summary stuff, right? Try to get to analysis and working with your sources that you find. Okay, that's one of the big skills that we're working on with this paper. Okay, and that's it for now. If you have any questions, please email me or drop by my office hours, Monday to Friday, 1 to 3, every day. Bye-bye.